Heads up, the following podcast contains adult language and deals with adult subjects. Keep this in mind as you listen. On with the show.
Hey folks, I'm Grace.
And I'm James. Welcome to Fundamental Shift, the podcast where we explore the major shakeups in our lives, their fault lines, and aftershocks.
Thanks for joining us. You're in for a real shift show. Hey y'all. Welcome to Fundamental Shift with Grace, not James, this week. But we do have my best friend of 20 years joining us today, Fania. We met in the Fundamentalist Church and surprisingly have survived, and our friendship has survived over many changes, and we're going to talk about some major shifts we've had in our lives and in our friendship today, and how those have connected, how they've intersected, how they've been parallel walks in a lot of ways. And we hope you guys can connect with that as well and maybe share some of your stories on our voicemail. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Fania, and she's going to let you know a little bit about her background. You guys know my main background, that I grew up in the Fundamentalist Baptist Church and have been sort of anywhere and everywhere after that you can think of. And I am just going to go ahead and let her take it away now.
So I feel really lucky that Grace and I have a friendship that went through so many fundamental shifts. We actually met doing outreach, I guess you would call it, for Fundamentalist Church at the time. And we spent several years as friends, as deeply Christian friends, and then both went on our own journeys and then ended up deeply not Christian friends. So I think that's really rare, and I feel very lucky, and I think it's interesting that we didn't actually influence each other that much. Like, neither of us were like, hey, why are you still in the church? Why do you still believe these things? They're ridiculous. Come out here and join me. We both just let each other go on our individual journeys and ended up in a really great place.
The interesting thing is, along that journey, I think we both had really intense and different reactions to each other. We really just responded to one another in ways that I found interesting looking back on them with you today as we were prepping for the show a little bit. We just talked about the big shifts we wanted to talk about today. We didn't get too deep into it. Wanted to save that for you guys. And I really found it interesting that we did have these deep emotional responses, but we didn't pressure each other, as you're saying. We didn't do that sort of Christian evangelical thing of proselytizing each other to the other side.
We didn't even pray for each other.
We didn't. We didn't even pray for each other.
So the one thing that I want to hear about your perspective on, if we can go start with some of these crazy memories from decades ago, but is this time where I think I started to question the church sooner. And again, I was not in the church as long as you were. Like we used to say, I use the church as a coping mechanism. The Fundamentalist Church I was a part of, I was in very deep, but for a relatively short period of time. But I do remember when I had sort of left before you. And I remember we were in a canoe in some lake somewhere here locally. I think it was a borrowed canoe for sure.
And I think it was probably South Carolina.
Yeah, but a borrowed canoe in South Carolina. And you were very upset because I had disclosed that I had had premarital sex. And that was very morally distressing to you. Mm-hmm. And I think what was neat about our friendship at the time is that we were just very direct. Like, you were very direct with me how distressed you were at the fact that I would commit such a mortal sin. And I've always wondered what was going through your mind at that time. What were your thoughts?
So the interesting thing is when you get 41, your memories muddle a lot. Of course. And sometimes even time can be an interesting thing to look back and figure out where things fit chronologically, which we were struggling with somewhat today.
Because we're old.
But there are these moments where you have this really poignant memory of, I remember what it smelled like, what it looked like, what it felt like. And I have to say that that's one of those moments. The South and the hot summer, just super humid, just, kind of miserable, but we love the outdoors, and we would always try to find something to do outdoors, and we love the water, especially me. I'm a water baby. And I remember just like being happy in the canoe, and then all of a sudden, bam!
My friend is a heathen. She's going to hell.
Yes, actually.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Which was kind of terrible, because it wasn't this feeling that I think some people do have in the evangelical church of like judgment. It really was not a feeling of judgment. It was an overwhelming fear.
That we weren't going to spend eternity together.
That we weren't going to spend eternity together.
That
I was
breaks my heart.
scared for you. And I really just felt deeply, deeply saddened. I didn't judge you at all.
Right.
I didn't feel that you were a bad person. I didn't feel that anything had inherently changed about you, which is super interesting. I just felt sad and fearful. And I remember just thinking that I had to find some way to love you back into the truth, right? That I had to find some way to pull you back in, not as a notch on my belt, not as any kind of weird thing like that, not as we've won one for the king or anything like that, because I definitely came from the sort of once saved, always saved camp. So in my mind, you still belong to God. But we had to kind of get you back on the path, because I was super scared. And because if you didn't, then that meant that maybe you didn't really mean it, which is what a lot of evangelicals will say if folks don't sort of come back on the path. Then, well, you didn't mean it when you said it sort of the first time, right? So my true fear at that time was absolutely that I would not spend eternity with you.
Yeah.
And since my family was you, and my biological family was really not connected to me in that way, and my whole existence of who I considered family and what I belonged to was evangelicalism, if I lost you, I lost sort of everything, actually.
Yeah.
Because you meant more to me than anyone else, including my biological family. So if I lost you, I lost everything. And that was a thing that they told me we could lose it over.
For sure. I think about that a lot, actually. And I think that's why, even though this happened so many, many, many years ago,
we were babies.
I think that's why it stuck with me, because I often do think about that emotional abuse that the church puts, excuse me for just calling it out like that.
Sure.
But that emotional abuse that it puts on mothers and grandfathers to think that their beloved children are going to be gnashing their teeth, that they are going to be eternally separated. We always, especially those of us who've left the church, we always think about, how oppressive the church is and how mean and how dismissive they are of people who have left the church. But we don't really stop and acknowledge those people, even though they were probably kind of shitty to us, those people that they're actually also in emotional distress and also under an abusive system that makes them fear for the souls of their loved ones. That's really
instead
painful.
of doing the wailing in the afterlife, you're doing it now.
Exactly. And I do believe that many of those people that we were probably on all of their prayer lists,
absolutely,
as prodigal children. But I
quite frankly, I put you on some of them.
I'm sure you did. But I do feel bad for them. I feel very sad. Not that I caused them pain, because the church caused them pain. Right? It's not me leaving that caused them pain. It's the church teaching them that my leaving was harmful.
Absolutely.
That causes them pain. And I do have a soft spot for those, even though they weren't always the nicest people about it, but I think that they came from a place of pain.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked even, I think, a little bit about that day, and at least you did, and it was something that I sort of filed. I don't know that it was something that I could deal with that day, but it was something that I filed. I remember going on with the next day and the rest of the days after and thinking about it, and that there was sort of a time of quiet between us. And the next big shift that I remember is being in a Borders bookstore. Back when there were, many bookstores and lots of large Borders bookstores where we could buy media, which is my Achilles heel, not clothes.
Books. Pre-internet. Well, I'm sure the internet existed. We just didn't have access to it at the time.
True. Oh, but there was Juno.
Oh, yeah.
I was allowed to use Juno. And just reaching out to you that day because I just had so many thoughts on my mind. And I didn't have a lot of privacy at home. And so I remember being at this Borders and just calling you and spending hours in this Borders with the phone against my face, like burning my cheek and walking in circles in this Borders, knowing that there were people watching me thinking, are you trying to steal something? Like, what
this was
is
a flip
going
phone,
on?
right? Just for context.
Yes, of course. And I was not going to T9 text you all of these things. And if you know what T9 is, then we know how old you are.
You probably also know what Juno is. By the way, that was an old email service. Anyways.
Only comparable to what? Net Zero? Maybe. And starting to say, I remember that I was nervous. It's funny because even though you had shared these things with me, I was nervous to start to say to you, I'm not sure I believe all of these things.
Well, because it's life-shattering.
Because I thought, well, even though you've done this thing, surely you still believe all of these things.
Right.
And I thought, oh, well, I'm going to be the big, news spiller or whatever. And, really you were already there.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe, I don't know, waiting for me to be there. But instead of being even the person that goes, well, of course, and blah, 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 I just remember that you were kind and you listened and you were very measured in your response. And I do remember that very much about it. I mean, you definitely encouraged me and said, yes, I'm here too. And these are things I've been thinking about and ways that I've been growing in. But you didn't have that zealot nature.
Yeah, because I really wanted to say, yeah, girl, hurry up, let's go. It's fun out here.
Right.
Come be chill.
But it struck me that you didn't. And I think that probably helped me share more. And you knew enough at that time, being probably a part of your profession as a nurse, probably just part of your nature as a person. You knew, like, if I do that, that might not be the best response. So for me, I think it just helped me keep talking. It took me so long to get it out, and then feeling heard and feeling supported, and also just feeling like, oh, I have a companion in this. Like, we're in the same boat. You might have been in the front of the canoe steering it because you were a bit ahead of me in some of these decisions, but we were in that boat together. And we both had a very, when you're in a canoe, just to keep taking it to that level, and that's where sort of all of this started, each person in the front and the back has this very specific thing they're doing to direct that canoe, whether it be for speed or accuracy. And I feel like you sort of had that speed part.
Yeah, because I'm not accurate. You're the one that really deeply processed all of this shit.
It's probably true. And then I had that back part of, like, going to the left or the right. And I love that about us. I love that we have always had this very balanced.
I like it. Yeah, I'm like, you're like, where are we going? I'm like, sure as fuck not here. Let's just go. And you're like, well, let's meticulously chart this course by reflecting on philosophers and the wisdom of the ancients.
And I'm like,
dragging
my feet, and you're like, it's time to push the gas. Speaking of getting the fuck out of there,
let's talk about gay shit.
Gay shit. Okay.
You know what I think is great and very interesting to me is I think a lot of people, or at least from what I read of other people's stories, is that they realize that they are gay and then they leave the church. Mm-hmm. And I think what was interesting, I can't speak for you, but I think for both of us, maybe, we left the church and then we're like, we're gay.
Yes.
So I find that interesting because it doesn't seem like, to be clear though, everyone, we were super gay while in the church.
Yes.
We just didn't realize it because this was pre-Ellen, or, I know that's not an excuse. A lot of people did come out pre-Ellen and did amazing, powerful work. We were not those people. We were not that self-aware, or maybe not that brave. But
we also weren't that age, just to be fair.
We didn't have a reference. We didn't know it was a thing. We just thought we were really good at being celibate. Because we thought
we were badass girls, man.
Yeah, we were just...
Hey, I was a straight Xena fan.
That's true. We were...
Girl. It was on my MySpace. I just dated myself, people. I literally wrote on my MySpace page, straight Xena fan. But yes, Xena Warrior Princess, straight Xena fan.
But that was even later, because that was back when we even had the concept that straight was a thing, right? Like, I don't even...
True.
No, earlier, there was no context. There was no... Like, I don't even remember contemplating that was even an option.
I remember working at a Baptist camp. We had one gay guy on our crew.
Scandal.
And I didn't know what to do with him. And we also had a girl on my crew who would listen to the Indigo Girls.
Oh, dear.
And I didn't know who the hell the Indigo Girls were. So, but then I listened to the music and I loved it. And I recognized that I resonated in a way, I hadn't resonated with other things. And I remember thinking about her, well, like, was this mean about you? Like, it kind of set off a whole thing, but it still didn't really say gay to me.
Right. I think that's so bizarre.
And even the guy on staff, I don't know, we just thought of him as like a single oddity.
Yeah, why did we have no... This is what I don't understand. Like, no... Because we're both super gay.
From birth. Anytime we told anyone, it was like, well, duh.
But so I don't understand, like, why...
But I was the last person to know.
Well, that is true. And we'll get to that in a second when we get to our next fundamental shift memory. But I think that's fascinating, that what got us out of the church was like, there's no way there's a literal... Like, we were very academic about it. I think that what strikes me is that for us, it was not so much a personal conviction or personal experience, but that it was a very academic proposition for us. Like, clearly a literal 6-day creation is impossible based on science. Therefore, this all must be nonsense. I just think it was really philosophical and intellectual for us, which is probably why we didn't like face the emotional impact of the church on us early on, because we were very thoughtful about it. It wasn't like a gut feeling reason that we both left. I don't know, maybe I'm speaking for you now, but it just seemed like
it had nothing to do with why I left.
Yeah, it had. It wasn't like, here I am, out, gay, my church has rejected me, what should I do? It was, wow, this is actually a bunch of harmful nonsense, and I would like to not be a part of it anymore. Mm-hmm. ... Huh. Also turns out I'm gay.
Yeah. But I did say and do a lot of things during that time that people after said, well, well, duh.
Well, clearly, we were super gay while we were in the church.
Like, I remember saying to people, I'm the straightest gay woman you'll ever meet.
Right.
Like, I said several things
you
like that.
said a lot of dumb things. I'm not going to go into all of them here on the podcast. And that's
the dumbest thing for anyone to say. I was very much a tomboy, and obviously there are straight ladies who are tomboys who...
And femme also.
And femme women who are gay. So I'm in no way putting a stereotype on someone. And I don't want someone to think that because I was that's totally why people thought I was gay.
Right. No, people thought you were gay because you were super gay.
Yeah. I mean, although in our space, it could have had something to do with it, which is also unfair. but, you know, presenting myself in pants, for instance.
Oh, yeah, that's pretty scandalous.
And, you know, I always wore overalls and things like that, and people took a lot of those things, and I was outdoorsy and blah, blah, blah. And there are plenty of straight women who are all of those things who are absolutely straight.
Right.
And there are plenty of gay women who wear dresses and are
sure.
way super more femme than I will ever be. So I'm definitely not putting any stereotypes around those. It's just in these evangelical spaces, those are signals to folks. And for me, it was more what was coming out of my mouth.
Yeah, you did a lot of processing.
And when I was posting online, I mean, I remember even looking at someone at a party in college one time and saying, you know, oh, I wish that it wasn't a sin, and that one time before I die, I can sleep with a woman.
One time. Well, yeah.
So in that way, I mean, it proves the academic process, right? Because for me, I was doing a mental exercise.
It was all very mental in the beginning, and I think, I mean, yeah, there's that time that you were like, why do all these gay women keep hitting on me? And I was like, 'cause you're gay. Yeah. But anyhow,
I do remember.
It was at that record store. I think it was the record store off of Independence that doesn't exist anymore.
Yes,
but,
it was.
I think that when the part that was emotional for us, I think, again, I'm speaking for you, so I have no idea. But maybe I just don't want to be alone in this. The part that was really painful and emotional for us is realizing that we were so wrong about something we were so sure about. And I think that's what really broke us. That was the like every decision that we made about leaving the church was very intellectual. It was well thought out. Not well, that's being generous. It was over thought out. We processed, we reflected, we researched. I mean, I remember doing a lot of study about what is the meaning of faith in the context of the world at large, and you know, and the things that really resonated with me was the harm that the church, especially the fundamentalist evangelical church, was doing throughout the world. Like, these were very external processes. Like, we were looking at the damage that the church does in the world, and we didn't want to be a part of it. It wasn't personal. Mm-hmm. The part that hit us hard personally was like, girl, we done fucked up.
Yeah.
Like, we participated in
we
this.
fucked some other people up.
Yeah.
Along the way.
I mean, that scares me.
I live with that on my conscience to this day.
We've repented. We've tried to make amends, but
I don't forgive myself for it, though. And I'm kind of okay with that. That's actually what I sit easy with, is not forgiving myself for it.
We were part of a shitty thing that did shitty things in the world. And I think that's where the emotions got involved for us.
Yeah. And I think it would be hard for some people to hear me say that I don't forgive myself. But for me, that's a motivator.
Yeah, we fucked up.
To continue to do good in the world. And it's not a tally chart. No. I'm not trying to say tit for tat and like everything I did bad, now I'm going to do something good in exact relation. What it does for me, and maybe a better way to say it is, I don't excuse myself.
I like it.
Right? I'm at peace with myself. And I understand why I did what I did, where I came from, but I don't excuse myself. And that is a motivator for me to do good in the world and to be sure that, yes, somewhat to the degree I did harm, hopefully I do over and above good, but not in this sort of scale kind of way, just more in a motivation kind of way, and just listening to the things around me that are compelling me to do good in the world, and responding to those and not ignoring those, and not, because I do think in the evangelical world you can be sort of forced into certain molds and to do certain things as quote unquote outreach or missions, and you're told what is good to do.
Right, you do it because you're supposed to do it.
Yeah. And here are the top 5 things we're supposed to do for Jesus, right?
Not because you're motivated by compassion for your fellow human beings.
Right.
Or a part of a community.
Or even just what you're good at.
Right.
I mean, yes, they put you through batteries of gifts of the Spirit, but half the time, because you're a woman, even though your gift is prophecy, so you should be preaching, you get stuck down in the nursery with the kids because you're a woman. And how dare you teach a man who's over 12?
Right.
So I don't really even buy into So that part of it, I don't really think they're trying to place you where you can do the most good as much as they're trying to place you where the most ardent places of their belief system are.
Right, where you should be. We did have a bit of a period of being frozen after that. Like, if I was so wrong about this, what if I'm wrong about every other thing in my life?
Truth be told, I had a decade of that.
Because how do you trust yourself? We were wrong. We were really, really wrong.
Really, really wrong. And it's better to sit here and do nothing than to fuck someone up.
Oh, 100%. Right. And I think that is why we
and
have
not
a hard
even
time.
me. My consideration wasn't even for me.
No, of course.
I mean, because I got really fucked up sitting on the side and doing nothing for 10 years. But it took me that long to recover. So then I said to myself, well, maybe that was the right thing to do in my case.
Right, better than jumping head first into some other misguided cult-like experience.
But
right?
I definitely got to a point where if I didn't do something, that was going to become damaging.
Of course, of course.
So, hence, here we are in the ears of you merciful people.
we turned out okay, I think.
I think we did. So that is all a little reminiscent of a phone call we had when you were in Canada.
Oh, yeah. When you told me that you thought you might be gay and I was on the other side of the phone dancing in my kitchen secretly. You're like, huh, really? That's interesting. Tell me more. Okay. Yeah, I never saw that coming straight, Xena, warrior, princess fan.
Responding with the same measured, wonderful response you had.
Well, that's the midwife in me. I'm creating space for you to go through your process.
So when I called you to give you that news, I had moved to Portland. And that was something that I did after my father died of cancer. And my grandmother died soon after that of cancer. And my grandmother sort of raised me, and my dad was my big parent figure. And a lot of people in the church told me not having my mom around was the reason I was the way I was. So that was sort of a whole different dig there. We did have a complicated relationship, but I loved both of my parents. My mom was still alive at that time, and we did have a relationship, but it wasn't terribly close. And at the time, she was, healthy and fine on her own. So
Physically healthy.
Physically, yes. And so I went out and decided that I basically would come out in Portland. That was really the idea.
I do love this phase of your life.
I wanted to leave, just leave my hometown, and it's sort of that whole, I remember at the time this rang in my head, and even now it sort of rings true, which is, there is a scripture about Jesus that a prophet is not welcome in his own hometown. And I think whether you believe the Bible in its totality, it still has plenty of good things to say. I think that happens to be a truism of the Bible. And for me, I really felt that at the time. Not that I was necessarily a prophet, but just, a person coming from a certain perspective was not going to be welcome in their own hometown. And at that time, I did still believe. I was still in it to serve in the ministry. And I thought, well, I'll go to Portland. I'll go somewhere and find one of these liberal churches and become part of them. And I'll do my process there and everything will be fine. And I went to Portland, and lo and behold, I was very depressed, and I really struggled there. And that's for the simple reason of I didn't grieve properly before I left. I jumped ship a little too early. I don't think it's a bad idea to move. I don't think it's a bad idea to do something that's really unsafe for you as a Southern person, to go to a different town where it might be safer for you. I really support those ideas for people.
And your apartment was beautiful.
My apartment was killer. Giving up that apartment was the worst. I lived in the Pearl, Portland people. And I still miss Portland to this day. I still struggle with that. I still love the West. I do still look forward to moving west.
We went to a gay bar. That was our first. Was that our first?
We went to the Egyptian.
first.
which was Portland's oldest lesbian bar, not just gay bar, and it's no longer there. So I am so happy that we went to the Egyptian and watched karaoke. It was fabulous.
It was fabulous.
And I just wanted to go find myself there, and I did, which is wonderful. And I did come back east. My mother got sick at that time, unfortunately, and I did come back east. And I don't regret that because I met my wife in that process, and I don't regret it because I had really faced my demons before I left. I just didn't want to have Sunday dinner with them. And when I came back east, I learned how to not have Sunday dinner with them in the midst of them.
Sounds like a cool metaphor, but I don't get it.
Meaning, yes, I've conquered these things, but it doesn't mean I would just want to see them all the time.
I see.
Right?
Okay. Right. You're not like they're gonna be
in a lot of ways. There's just so many ghosts of my past. If I drive just 20 minutes from my house.
Nope, I see it.
And I don't necessarily want to sit down and have Sunday dinner with that every week. I don't want to constantly pass that, constantly be around that.
Yep.
But I learned how to not have Sunday dinner with it right in the midst of it by just simply saying no.
Yeah. Okay, I get it.
You know, instead of having this pot roast Sunday dinner, I'm going to go over here and have this salad at this cafe or whatever. However,
there's other good things here.
Work this more to, this metaphor. There's other good things here, as you said. Yeah, and I think that it was good for me on a lot of levels just to sort of look all those things in the eye and say, this is who I am. You know, take it or leave it.
Hey, hometown. I'm here.
Hey, hometown. But to sort of go into our next block of what we want to talk about with a big shift.
Something. I forgot. Okay.
And the tie-in is all the community you lose. We want to just acknowledge that because I lost casseroles and calls when you're sick and calls when they haven't seen you in 2 weeks and game nights and dinner clubs and just all the wonderful things and studies. And I did enjoy those studies because that's where people got real. And prayer groups, again, maybe not so much for every little prayer you had, but because people got real and you get to know them and you really bonded and you formed this true community. I lost all of that in just what felt like a snap to me.
It's true. I mean, looking back, I don't know if it was true community because it was based on whether or not you performed correctly. But yeah, I feel that hard. But
it sure felt good.
It sure did feel like real
community. And you
community.
sure miss the casserole when you get sick now.
And I sure do miss a good casserole. Yeah, and we haven't really found a replacement for that. And maybe there isn't one because part of what made it so good was how unhealthy it was, right?
I've always said that. The thing that makes it work is what makes it so awful.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, because it's so easy to rally people around the things that you, for sure, 100 certain believe, which is bullshit anyway, but it's comforting to people, and what you for sure 100% hate.
Yeah, and there you go. That's the recipe. And when you come to
a place and you say, "Oh, but life is pretty gray," or even just it's a rainbow of colors, people go, "Oh gosh,"
right?
When it becomes not black and white. It's super scary.
Yeah. I mean, I'm lucky now because I have, you find that a little bit too in the gay community, even though some of our stuff isn't so healthy because we're all human and whatnot. But I think we have been able to find that in some degree, but nothing to the level that it was in the church. And I think that's probably a good thing, right? Because this is where all a little bit more...
Right, because it's a cult, right? It's a movement. And the way I use the word cult, I want to be very careful here, is in the sense of cultish attitudes, meaning sort of that us for no more mentality, us against the world mentality. I mean, people can have a cultish attitude in one couple,
correct,
right? And two people who feel like they're against the world. So I use that as an adjective, not as a noun. And just to understand that, while I'm not necessarily calling every fundamental religion a cult, there are cultish tendencies in those types of spaces. And unfortunately, those tendencies are what make you stick.
Yeah.
They're what make you glue. They're what make you work. And when you have that us against them and all of us, for each other mentality, it's just an overwhelming movement, and you feel part of that greater sum in a way that nothing else can compare to.
So I think that's one of the things when our friendship really got solidified was when we were like, you know, we have that for each other. Like, let's be each other's community. Let's take the things that we can sort of take from our experiences, which is having that intense community, and maybe make it in a way that's a little bit more healthy. I don't know. We'll try, and be that for each other.
We've had a lot of therapy.
Be that for each other. Be that family, or as you say, framly, where. You know, the only motivation for me to bring you a casserole is because I care about you, and not because I'm afraid that if I don't bring you a casserole, I'm going to go to hell.
It's the thing to do.
Right.
Whether it be the Southern thing or the Christian thing.
Right. There's nobody watching me bring you a casserole. I just bring it because you like casserole. I actually have not made you a casserole, but probably should sometime. If you're ever sick, I'll bring you a casserole. You have
made me many other wonderful dishes. I think the interesting thing, too, that I want to note to our listeners, because it's probably not obvious from us chatting here, is that we have only lived in our 20-year friendship about a quarter of that in the same town.
Yeah, that sucks, by the way.
Yeah, it super sucks. But I think, and what I want to speak to there, is that kind of intense community, what it requires is intentionality and choice. Because we have chosen to speak on the phone, we didn't feel like it, to keep the communication thread. We have chosen to text at least a, hey, hun, how you doing? In the mornings when you're working a lot of night shifts and, you know, I'm on a different schedule and we are 2 or 3 hours off our, you know, East and West Coast schedules. We have chosen to do that. Even if I wake up to your daytime night texts and you go to bed to my morning, what are night texts to you, like, we are choosing that communication and we are choosing that connection. And for me, that is absolutely the key to who we are. That's absolutely the key to what has made our 20-year friendship successful and what will make it successful to the day we die.
You are super into intentionality.
But so are you.
I mean, I wouldn't have thought that, but maybe.
We're not always, you know, up when the other person's up.
I see. Okay.
We're often tired when the other person's up. And yet we respond. To me, that is the key to who we are, is that we constantly choose it over and over and over again, daily.
So much so that I didn't even think it was a choice, but now that you mention it.
But it kind of is, right?
Yeah, no, I'm going to give it to you.
Even when we were younger, I remember that, particularly when we first met, we were introduced by another person in our volunteer sphere, and we didn't really know each other, but we knew her, and we sort of trusted her, so we were like, okay, this will be fine. And even then, it was intentional. Like, we were intentionally trying to hang out and chat with each other and things like that. And I think most people don't do that. Most people think, oh, well, if I click with you, then that's it. Right?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. That we didn't always click, did we? But now look at us, just a clickety-clacking. But I don't know that there's necessarily a roadmap to success for these. I honestly, at the risk of sounding like an anti-intellectual, I think we were just really fucking lucky, dude. Like,
I think that's part of it, but I definitely think we had our own hand in it. I think it was a little bit of both. Because I also remember something you said to me that stuck with me. We were talking about friendship one time, and someone was saying to me, oh, but we don't have these things in common or whatever. And you were like, but you don't have a lot of common things with your wife, and you guys have a great marriage. And then you were like, you don't really have a lot of things in common with me on the surface.
It's true.
Right? Like maybe 50-50?
Yeah.
As far as, like, you know, what TV you like.
Right, your taste in TV is terrible.
My taste in TV is rad. She really wants to talk about it, people, but we're not going to. Star Trek, that's all I'm going to say.
That's a good show.
And she doesn't think that. You know, things like that. And we were like, no, it's, what are your values? What do you hold dear?
Right.
You know, and not like some weird evangelical values.
No. But like,
crap.
we like an examined life. we like to build community and have compassion for people who live in the community with us. Like, I think those things are more important than, are we going to watch, what was that scary show you made me watch?
It wasn't scary at all. It's super campy. It's from the 60s. You guys should go watch it. It's called Dark Shadows.
Yeah.
It's made a little resurgence. It's not the Johnny Depp movie, which was terrible.
Okay. Anyways.
Yeah,
it is. True friendship just goes deeper than we just enjoy doing the same things.
And even that, we endure. And I am grateful for that.
Yeah.
So I think we're, guys, at the point where we just want to make a couple of recommendations to you guys. I know that Fania would like to promote a cause that's near and dear to her heart, which is...
Oh, yeah, I just stay mad about maternal mortality in this country, about people dying in childbirth and of preventable causes. Chief among them is anti-Black bias in medicine. And then you have those...
BlackWomen'sBlueprint.org. BlackWomen'sBlueprint.org will take you to their website and let you know about what they're doing. And then there's sistersong.net, assisting women of color. If you guys want to leave us voicemails, we will, of course, be super glad to hear them. So please give us a shout out. And then we also have our Twitter, Instagram, and our email, funshiftpod@gmail.com is probably the best way to get in touch with us. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of Fundamental Shift. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope there's things you connected to and things you want to maybe talk about with your own friends. So thank you guys.
Please subscribe to the podcast, rate and review us on iTunes and other podcasting platforms. Your feedback means a lot to us. It lets others find us more easily and helps us know more about the content you're looking for.
Now that you've heard from us, we want to hear from you. Here's how you can reach us. On YouTube and Facebook, simply search for Fundamental Shift.
On Twitter and Instagram, you can find us at FunShiftPod and at fun.shift.pod, respectively.
On the web, you can find us at funshiftpod.com. You can email us at funshiftpod@gmail.com, or you can leave us a voicemail at 704-665-7473.
Tune in next week when the pod drops on Tuesday.
And until then, remember folks, shift happens.